Welcome to the third video in the Great Guitar Build-Off Mandola build. In the previous video we had started bending the sides. In this video we're going to kind of jump around a little bit as I wait for glue to dry or wet bent sides to dry. We're going to start with the neck and we're going to install the truss rod. We're going to move to the top, cut out the basic shape, lay out the bracing, and then we're going to start gluing the blocks in on the body and the kerfed lining so that we can actually start putting this piece together, which should go fairly quickly from this point on.
Next step for the neck is to mark the center line. I want to do this before I cut the groove for the truss rod. I have a centering ruler, which makes it very easy, but I'm going to center it on this center piece of wood. Center line is marked. Now we've got a plan for the truss rod installation. So here's the truss rod. So this is going to sit in here just behind the nut. So the end of the truss rod is going to be there. So this requires a 1/4 inch slot, 3/8 of an inch deep, or metric is 6 millimeters wide, 8 millimeters deep. So I'm going to set up a router to cut this channel, and we'll do it in multiple passes. One other thing I'm going to do before I route the truss rod channel is also to mark where the neck is going to be. So I've marked the width. The width of the nut is going to be 1.25 inches. So I've gone 5/8 of an inch from each side of the center line at the nut. The measurement at the 12th fret is going to be 1 22/32. So I have to mark that measurement where the 12th fret is going to be. So the 12th fret is right here. And this line here is the line where we're crossing the body. So 27/32 is how wide on each side of the center line we have to go. So 27/32. And then we can draw a line, mark. And again, this is, I'm going to mark the line slightly oversized because we will work down to that width. much easier to do this before I have a groove running down the middle of my neck. So what I've done is I drilled a 1/4 inch hole 3/8 of an inch deep at the end of the cut that I'm going to make. I'm going to run this groove straight out into the headstock, and then we'll cover this with the plate, and we'll have a cover for it. So that what this has allowed me to do is I can just set this right onto the bit, and I've lined the fence up, so when I cut this groove it should go right down the middle of the neck. Groove is cut, the truss rod fits nice and flush. We'll clear out this later on to give the truss rod a little more room. And as for right now, this is good to go. I just use a chisel and clean out some of that spot, or maybe a Dremel. The next step will be to glue the blocks that I cut off the neck blank onto the neck at the end. This is so that we can create a nice dovetail and a nice end block to kind of blend into the body. So I'll line these up, I'll glue them and clamp them, and then we'll be done with our work on the neck for today. The key is to line up all these pieces so that they flow nice and even. Got the joint glued up. Everything lines up nicely. I've set it on a melamine board so that it won't stick, and we'll let that dry. I've begun fitting the blocks into the corners. So this block I have shaped, and it'll form the glue surface for these 3 pieces. I'll make a couple of calls to pull those edges in. We are looking totally flush on the bottom side, and then we will be able to start putting the body together, which will be very cool. I'm preparing to cut the dovetail in the neck block. I prefer to cut this before I put the instrument together. So what I've done is I've set the depth of my dovetail bit to the depth which is going to be 3/4 of an inch less the thickness of the side, because when I glue the side to the neck block, that's going to set us out a little bit, but I want my dovetail to be 3/4 of an inch deep. So I've set that up. I've lined up the center of the bit with the center line. I also have a line drawn on the plate for how far in I have to make the dovetail, so that I can stop before I go through. Then I'll cut it to thickness. Always for safety, I always leave my pieces oversized as long as I can. Alright, we got the first corner block glued in place. What I did is I fitted it carefully, and I used some acetone on the rosewood because there's oils in the wood that can keep the glue from sticking. And this is glued together with Titebond 3, and what we'll do is we'll slowly work our way around and glue up the other blocks as we get to them. Alright, at this point we have these blocks are glued up. What I'm trying to do is make sure that when I clamp in my neck block, that it's going to be lined up on the center line. So I'm taking my ruler, running it center to center, making sure that center line is right on the mark when I pull it all the way over here. And there it is. So we'll be able to clamp this in place, and double checking all along the way to make sure that that lines up. At this point I've got the top. It's not quite sanded to the thickness I want it to be, but I've decided that I want to cut it out. and then sand it to the thickness. Right now it's about 0.12 inches thick. I want it to be a little under 0.1, leave myself some room for sanding. So what I got to do is, this is what I've decided is going to be the top. I'm just trying to figure where on this blank that I want to cut the body, because it's quite a bit oversized. So I did draw a center line on both sides where the glue joint is. And I kind of like the way this comes together. This is a figured board. When I get some dye on it, you'll see the figure pop. It's not heavy figure, but I think I want to put this down here. And then I'll trace out the shape, and I'll cut a good distance outside the line to give myself some wiggle room, and then we'll mark the braces. I've remarked the center line on the back. I just sanded it smooth just because I really want the braces to have a nice smooth surface to be glued to. Now I'm going to mark the brace locations for the cross braces. So I marked the mark here. That's 1/2 inch back. That's how much I had left extra. So I'm going to line my template up with that mark. And I'm going to mark the brace locations. Transfer those to lines across here. There's the brace, those are the cross braces. I'm going to pencil in the outline of so this will tell me where my braces have to end. We got the blocks up at the top end all completely installed. We're now going to install the tail block, and I've taken it out of the forms for this because I can get a much better shape on the tail block than my form. My forms seem a little pointy. I didn't cut them right, but the tail block will round off the back. So I'm just wiping down the rosewood with a little bit of acetone. Get any oil off that's on there. Got the glue applied. The excess off the edges. I'm using a piece of melamine. This way anything that sticks, it won't stick to my bench. I'm going to use 4 clamps to hold this in place. 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. Clamp one side at a time. damp cloth and wipe off any glue squeeze out, and then we'll let that dry. At this point, I am ready to begin putting the kerfed lining on the sides. I've used some acetone on the rosewood already to release the surface oils. And I have my kerfing, which is mahogany, just a basic triangle. And what we need to do is we need to glue it around this upper edge, either flush with or a little above the top. And so we need to cut it to length. Sometimes it breaks off, but that's okay because we can fit it back together. So I'm just going to grab some hot water because I'm switching to Old Brown glue. This is a similar to a hide glue, and it will also be able to be undone if we have to. Okay, I've applied some glue to the back of the kerfing strip. We're going to bring it around inside, and we're going to start clamping it from one end. I use these little mini clamps, but you can use clothespins. Like I said, it's got to be just proud. You do not want to make it below the side. This is what helps to hold the top and the back on, because the sides are too thin to give you a good glue surface.
Thanks for watching. The build project is still continuing. In the next video, we will inlay the back strip, and we will be installing the bracing on the top, possibly the bracing on the back, and as we progress to getting the body assembled. And it's moving along pretty quickly.